And as I said, great to hear Barnesy. He's a wonderful singer. Barnesy's also he was a massive Kings of the Sun fan like ourselves. And so tonight we have an audience with the King, one of the Kings.
Yes, joining
wonderful.
us on the line, Clifford Hoad. Cliff, how are you?
Pretty good, Neil. Calling you all the way from Queensland. Hello there, Melbourne.
Yes, and Jeff's in the studio with me as well. And as Jeff just said, both of us used to see Kings of the Sun quite a lot here in Melbourne, and it's been far too many long years since you guys have been in Melbourne.
Oh, listen, rock and roll central, Melbourne. We used to love coming down to Melbourne, and I think the coldest I've ever been in my life was getting locked outside the Palace one night after we come off stage, and I couldn't get back in, and I just was in a pair of shorts, and so I remember Melbourne that way, you know.
Was it 1998 with Sammy Hagar? You did a gig at the Palace. Was that the last gig you would have done in Melbourne?
That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
It was freezing.
Now, Cliff, the reason, partly, obviously, it's just great to be able to talk to you once again on air, but predominantly the reason that we're talking to you tonight, of course, is there are two new releases. One is a brand new Kings of the Sun album and also a new Rich and Famous CD, and we'll talk about the Rich and Famous in a few moments' time. But this Kings of the Sun album is officially the fourth album under that name. Tell us the story of how the album came about and why it's being released now.
Well, it's a bit of a miracle it turned up, actually, because when we come back from the USA and we ended with our contract with BMG Records, we come back to Australia and we didn't really want to call it quits, and we did a tour with Jimmy Barnes and went all over the country areas and Melbourne and Sydney, and then Jeff and I came back and we had a bit of a break, and music had changed so much, and we thought, well, we should record a new album and basically put some stuff down that we'd never ever dream of putting on a Kings of the Sun album, and we recorded Daddy Was a Hobo Man. And things moved along, and then Jeff and I became disenchanted with everything, and then we never released it. And we recorded it in a studio up here, and we never released it, and it lay dormant in a cardboard box for 15 years. And just recently, due to a lot of prompting, I found it, and a lot of people told me that I should release it just for the hell of it. And on listening, I was quite surprised how good it was. So I felt anyone who is a Kings of the Sun fan and know our sound will be happy, I suppose, to receive anything else that we've done, under that name. So that's what happened with it, and I'm so glad it's out there now, and I've had nothing but good reports back, and I'm glad it's not just locked away under spider webs and God knows where else. It was.
Well, we'll mention the website of where people can get it, because you can get it in several different formats. One is you can order it as a hard copy CD, or you can buy it as a download. Of course, the other project after Kings of the Sun, you and Jeff formed the Rich and Famous, and you've just released your third album under that name, which in some senses is almost like the seventh Kings of the Sun album.
Well, as I said, we were disenchanted. We'd gone as far as we could with Kings of the Sun, and on finishing that fourth album, we had a big long break, and then decided to not leave music, and we wanted to come back and with the same spirit as Kings of the Sun, and we started this band called the Rich and Famous. And so basically it's still the Hoad brothers writing classic rock and roll, however, with a bit of a twist, and it is the 2000s now, I guess, and we've tried to make it, I don't know, cutting edge without sounding like we're living in the past or living in the future. So Stand Back to Prepare to Be Amazed is the last album that we did, and I love that album, and we really, really tried our hardest on that third Rich and Famous album to capture everything that we were with Kings of the Sun, and rather than just fade out, we wanted to put as much as we could of ourselves into those songs and the performances, and I'm really glad we did, but it took superhuman effort because we didn't have any backing or anything as we did overseas, and so those all those albums combined, like there's 7 albums all up now, and it's a good body of work, and it's a good representation of our songs and where we're heading, you know.
Yeah, we're going to play a couple of tracks pretty soon, Cliff. But one of the greatest weekends of my life was back in 1991. I saw you Friday night at the Palace, Saturday night at the Sandown Park, and then Sunday at the 21st Century in Frankston. And that was a great gig to go to because you went sort of berserk. You had your motorbike helmet on. Amazing sort of, you know, you're one of the greatest drummers I've ever seen. But I don't know what happened during the gig. You sort of went a bit berserk. You kicked over the drum kit and stormed off stage. And then Jeff had to come back later and go, well, we want to keep playing, but we can't because Cliff has destroyed his kit. Do you have any memory of that night?
Well, it's actually quite shameful to hear it now because I'm not really pro wrecking drum kits. So it must have been I must have been told that the relationship was over or something, and or got jilted by a girl that night. But I can remember. I can remember being on the ground with drums, yeah, and in Melbourne, but it is pretty vague.
Yeah, it was still an incredible gig.
The helmet isn't. That was quite part of the show there for a while. I'd throw the cymbals in the air and headbutt them at the end, and I had a bass drum pedal on the front of the bass drum, and the band would end, and people loved that. So I do remember that part about it. And there was a point up here where we had. I don't know if anyone's got any footage of it, but I had flaming sticks, and the sticks caught alight, and so that was all like the sensational novelty things that we amused ourselves with towards the end of it all.
Just for people listening who might not be familiar with the whole story, you were signed to Mushroom Records locally, RCA internationally, and you did the 2 big albums with 2 big producers. The first one with Eddie Kramer, who'd worked with Hendrix and Kiss and Zeppelin, and the second one with William Whitman, who worked with Cyndi Lauper and the Hooters and a lot of big acts. The first album spent 4 months in the top 200 in America, and you know, you should have conquered the world. Why didn't you? And is there anything that you'd do differently if you had your time again?
I think if we had well, I don't know about having our time again, but the first album, we had there's no excuses. The music obviously wasn't that outstanding to grab everybody's attention. You had Guns N' Roses in the charts. You had Van Halen. We had a lot of people we had to compete with at that point, and also, you know, you had the resurgence of Aerosmith and all those bands and Motley Crue, and like we were like young kids in a new football team. We just got driven into the ground. But if anything, we had a quite an old-fashioned. RCA, the chairman, he believed that thank heavens for us actually, because we ended up staying in America for 6 years, where most bands get dropped after the first album doesn't do anything. But he believed in longevity, and he tried, you know, building an artist's repertoire over a period of 3 and 4 years, which is unheard of these days, and building up a fan base slowly rather than just busting people out within the first 1 or 2 songs, and if nothing happens, then they can it all, which is, I'm sure, happened to a lot of people. But in a sense, it was a blessing and a curse that we never hit really, really hard. But we also had the luxury of staying there for the second and third album, and if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have never have made those records. So I see it in 2 different ways. But that's basically what happened. They had their money in other acts that were so much bigger than us, and we were just like a novelty of sorts, even though we were a great rock and roll band and ambassadors for the Australian sound. It just, you know what I'm saying? We went to the Cannes Film Festival with our little movie, and it was great, but it wasn't that great. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We were like an acquired taste, and that's how I've seen Kings of the Sun fans over the years, as they've discovered us in their own time, or whether they saw us live or they've heard us at a party or whatever, and that we've developed really, really strong, loyal following all around the world from that. So enough for Jeff and I to continue writing with this Rich and Famous thing, that's why we've kept going, in the belief that we actually do have a great sound, and we are more influential than we are successful, if you will.
Well, exactly. We're speaking to Clifford Hoad from Kings of the Sun and Rich and Famous at 8:30 on Triple RFM, and you're here with Neil and Jeff Jenkins. Cliff, just following on from that, I guess the thing to me that makes your records still stand up, and I'm speaking both of Rich and Famous and Kings of the Sun, is that you talk about that classic Aussie rock sound. The thing that I think sets you apart from a lot of the American bands who thought that the sound came from just cranking up the guitars. I've spoken to both members of the Angels and also Rose Tattoo, and the thing about all of those bands, including your work, is that the rhythm section swings, and it comes from that drums and bass and that sort of swing from the rhythm section, as opposed to just thinking the power comes from cranking the guitars up real loud.
Well, that's one theory. I think the Australian sound, to me, stretching back from the Buffalo days when Peter Wells from Rose Tattoo was with that band, it's actually quite like AC/DC. They were dry and they were direct, and there was a big vocal and there was a very sparse guitar, and then there was the rhythm section underneath, and that is the Australian sound to my ear, whether it's Rose Tattoo or the Angels or where Americans tend to fill the whole thing up. We were forever fighting with producers not wanting to fill our sound up to the point where it was just saturated. We wanted that it's not so much that the rhythm sections were any different, that you could actually hear them on an Australian recording breathing behind the band. That's what I feel anyway.
Now, before we hear a couple of tracks, Cliff, are we going to see the Rich and Famous here in Melbourne at any point in time?
I'm thinking more Kings of the Sun, mate.
Wow.
Well, either way, I'm not fussed either way.
That's right, but I'd like to just maybe go out as the two bands, because we have Rich and Famous fans, and for some reason they like Rich and Famous more than Kings of the Sun, but they're younger people who never saw us when we were Kings of the Sun. It's been confusing for some people, but Robin Riley from Rose Tattoo spoke to me maybe last year on the phone, and he said, "You guys should never change your name," and blah, 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 blah. And I said, we were at a point where we had to even continue in our own artistic endeavour. We had to change our name to reinvent ourselves. But it's all rock and roll, and it's the same to me. It's the same band, the same sound, the same voice, the same drums, the same. Jeff played all the guitars on all the albums. People don't really know that, but he did. He's a sensational guitar player. He wasn't just the blonde guy jumping around out the front. Him and I wrote the songs, and he played all the guitar on every album we've ever done. So there's a bit of a rap for him.
Well, you mentioned just quickly that third Kings of the Sun album from '93, Resurrection, which has been hard to get, but now that's available too via the website, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. kingsofthesunband.com. That's the website.
Fantastic.
So that's one of those situations. I'm a record collector myself. I love albums, and there's nothing worse than loving a band, and you're just going to these record stores or these searching and searching and searching. I mean, I'm only just getting albums that I've wanted for 20 years now, due to the internet and downloads. I mean, I'll live with a download. I'll live with something that I haven't heard just to get it. I think it's wonderful, really. It's just opened everything up, and even Kings of the Sun are now known as much as they should be. And if I drop dead tomorrow, thank heavens I don't, but it will live on now.
Yep.
And aside from all the music, Clifford, what are you still restoring classic cars and all of that stuff?
Well, that keeps me sane. But just of late, I'm teaching myself the guitar of all things, and I'm loving it. And I always gave that. Jeffrey was always such a great guitar player. He's always there, but he's off. He's had a couple of children now, and his directions. Still loves his music, but I'm basically, he's going, oh, you go off and write a few songs and we'll see what happens. So if I know if they're great tunes and I'm on acoustic, I could hopefully be able to con him into getting those 4 quad amps out and going and putting these songs down and sticking some steroids into them and just beefing them up, because I'd love to do another Kings of the Sun album in the spirit of, power ballads, the whole thing, and really take advantage of the fact that we both love the Everly Brothers and Jagger and Richards, and we never ever put enough double vocals down, and I'd love to do that. And I speak to Jeffrey about it, and he just shakes his head and walks off in the other direction. But if it's songs good enough, songs are good enough, and I've really been trying. I think I'll get him, and hopefully he'll come round.
And just finally, Cliff, are you doing a book?
A book? Oh, look, I started writing a book about my own life, just out of almost like a documentary of because I lost my mind a couple of times there, not knowing. I've been in a room drumming since I was 10. You got to remember. Then all of a sudden I went out of there and into the band, and I've been in and out recording studios and on buses, and it all ground to a halt, And then, but I'm still got my dreams, and I still would love to write a hit, and I'd still love the band to expand its fan and get as big as it ever could, and maybe I mightn't live to see that day, but I love to come to Melbourne also with the band as it was, and play some songs and play. I hear some of the places that we used to play are gone now, but I think we'd have a lot of friends there.
Indeed, it would be terrific. Cliff, it's been fantastic to catch up with you tonight. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and we're going to hear a couple of tracks now from those releases we've been speaking about. Firstly, from Kings of the Sun, and this was Daddy Was a Hobo Man, and just that website again, kingsofthesunband.com.
That's it.
Cliff, thank you very much, mate. Nice to talk.
Thank you, Neil, and 3 Triple R FM in Melbourne for just giving us some support and keeping the band alive.
Pleasure, mate, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you so much, Neil.
Couple of tracks there. First off, from Kings of the Sun, the title to the newly released 4th album, Daddy Was a Hobo Man, and we finished up there with a track off the 3rd Rich and Famous CD called Stand Back and Prepare to Be Amazed, and we've just heard the track called Voodoo Valentine, and we were speaking to Clifford Hoad, the drummer in the Kings of the Sun, and Jeff, to all of those people who have been emailing and ringing us saying this is a made-up band that you and I have fictitiously made up. There you are. Not true.
Because I do mention it every month with you on the show. We do love the Kings, and I'm still buzzing from talking to Clifford, who is one of the most amazing drummers I've ever seen. They're one of the greatest live bands I've ever seen, and it's very exciting to have these new records. So certainly check out kingsofthesunband.com. It's a great way, if you haven't heard of the Kings. Clifford's really keeping in touch with the fans, letting them know what he's up to and stories behind different albums, and certainly linking to YouTube. Check out some of the clips for songs such as, Black Leather and Serpentine. They are absolute classics. They should have conquered the world. They didn't, but it's great. They're still existing and thriving. The Kings of the Sun and the Rich and Famous. That 3rd Rich and Famous album, as you said, in a lot of ways, that's like the 7th Kings of the Sun album. There are so many great songs on that record. And obviously, he explained stylistically there are some differences, but overall, they're just a wonderful, wonderful band, Rich and Famous and Kings of the Sun.
Now, changing tack quite completely.